Welcome to our first formal virtual cabinet meeting of Newport City Council. So good morning, and it's very good to see you all here on the screen in front of me. Before we start the meeting formally, I'm just going to briefly run through the protocols. As with all virtual meetings, can I ask colleagues to keep their microphone on mute unless they're speaking, in order to eliminate feedback. And if we start to experience problems with the bandwidth, we may need to ask people to switch their cameras off as well, unless they're actually speaking, okay? As we go through the course of our meeting, in order to facilitate discussion, we'll be using the raise hand symbol to indicate that we would like to speak. And I can pick this up then and invite you in. Is everybody content to proceed with the meeting in that way? Okay. Thank you very much. So on the 18th of March, we sat in Committee Room 1, and at our last formal cabinet meeting, we made the important decision to move to emergency powers. And we moved to emergency powers in order to facilitate the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Here we are on the 24th of June, resuming our formal cabinet meetings with a virtual meeting. And I think it's only fitting, colleagues, that before we go into this meeting formally, that we just have a moment of quiet reflection where we remember all of those who've lost their lives during this period. And we think of all of our families and friends and the citizens of Newport and how they've been touched with this, by this, and their lives have been touched by this. So if I could just ask you to join me, colleagues, in a moment of quiet reflection. Thank you all for that. So to move on to our agenda for today then, the first item on the agenda is apologies, and I don't believe we've received any apologies for our meeting this morning. And the second item then is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? Thank you. We'll move then into the first paper that we are going to be discussing today, and this is our COVID-19 Strategic Recovery Aims. You can find this on pages 3 to 12 of your packs, and hopefully members will have all been able to access these packs virtually today. The purpose of this discussion and the consideration of the paper is for the Cabinet to approve and endorse the strategic recovery aims of the City Council. And I'd just like to give some background to this. As members will be aware, the COVID-19 health emergency has posed significant and unprecedented challenge to the way that we deliver our services and also to the way of life in Newport. Our focus as a local authority has been to preserve life, to minimise the spread of the virus and support our communities and the vulnerable who've been affected by this disease. During this really difficult time, the Council has continued to ensure that frontline services have been delivered to communities and individuals across Newport. At the very outset, we said that we'd focus on the vulnerable. We said that we would focus on providing childcare provision for key workers in order to enable the key workers to undertake their really important roles. We also said that we would continue with waste collection and focusing on health and safety and keeping people safe. And we also made a commitment to supporting businesses as best we could through this really difficult and challenging period. I'm pleased to report the waste collection continued throughout this period. We've delivered parcels, distributed parcels for those in need of food from our neighbourhood hubs. And our school staff, our professional staff in our schools have been absolutely outstanding in the commitment that they've made and the work that they've done in ensuring that childcare is available for key workers and for our vulnerable children. They have been absolutely outstanding. We've been able to keep our fly-in start settings open and continue the care and support that we provide through children and adult social services. We've administered over £30 million of business grants, and with our partners, we've provided safe and secure accommodation for the homeless in Newport. Our absolutely amazing council staff have been able to work at home throughout this period through this IT support that has been provided by the Shared Resource Service. And we've operated a virtual contact centre answering over 31,000 calls. In the midst of a crisis, Newport City Council has been consistent, it's been stable, and has supported the citizens of Newport. What I'd say as the leader of Newport City Council is that I'd like to extend my thanks on behalf of the Cabinet, and I'm sure that Cabinet colleagues will want to contribute as we go through the meeting, to all of our members of staff, our volunteers across the communities, our partners, and our individuals and families within our communities that have continued to deliver services, support vulnerable people, and work with the Welsh Government guidelines to keep everybody safe during this difficult and challenging time. This has been an unprecedented period, and really and truly the citizens of Newport have been outstanding. None of this would have been possible if it wasn't for the tremendous leadership that we've seen across the local authority from our heads of service and our senior leadership team. The leadership and the commitment has been outstanding. And I'd like, as the leader of the City Council, I'd really like to give my personal thanks to heads of service and to the senior team for the work that they've done. Because during this period, people have done over and above what they're required to do as part of their normal job roles in order to keep services running and keep the people of Newport safe. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that, that we recognise that, and we really show our appreciation for that. The citizens of Newport, I'm sure, appreciate that as well. Now, over the past few weeks, statistics from Public Health Wales have shown encouraging signs of COVID-19 cases slowing, but we are fully aware that future peaks could still occur. And as a city, we really need to remain vigilant and adhere to the guidance that's provided by Welsh Government and Public Health Wales. In recent weeks, we've seen the easing of restrictions and the re-establishment of some of our services, such as the household waste recycling facility. We've established a track and trace centre, and we've started to prepare for the opening of schools. We're now at a stage where further council services are recovering into what we're calling a new normal. This way of working is a different way of working, to how we've worked in the past, but it does enable us to ensure that services continue to be provided across the city. As a cabinet and as a council, we'll also have to adapt to new ways of working as well. And we have to have a renewed focus in order to ensure that the good work that has been done to date continues to progress, that we support our economy to rebuild and focus on those communities that have been impacted the most by COVID-19. To support us to do this, 4 strategic recovery aims have been proposed that will provide a focus for members, for our staff, our partners, and our communities in order to understand what our priorities are for this next year. Now, before we go on to consider these 4 strategic recovery aims in detail, I'd just like to invite Cabinet colleagues to make any comments or observations that they may have, focusing on our response to COVID, and we'll save our comments for the recovery aims for the second part of the discussion on this paper. Councillor Jevons, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just to echo your commentary regarding staff and the way in which they've stepped up to the plate in these unprecedented times. None of us have ever been through this before. We talk about second and third spikes, and none of us really want to go through it again. But Newport City Council staff, whether it be in offices, or I must say the people that from my particular portfolio area, but certainly from others that are making certainly contact with other people out there, especially in the early days of the COVID pandemic, whereas some of us were in our homes and offices working, some that had to be there, some that were there by other people's choice. But certainly the people that were out there collecting refuse, etc., carers, we can go on and on. But I think our hat needs to come off to those especially, as those were unprecedented times, very scary times for those people that were out there. But just to echo your thoughts, Leader, and the praise you've given, but perhaps a little bit of extra thought to frontline staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. It's pretty much just to echo what you've both already said. I've just been very humbled by the way our staff stepped up. They've done everything and then some. Everyone from, as Roger said, the bin collections, the recycling, the frontline workers, the unsung heroes, as I would call them, that have gone the extra mile. There's a resident in my ward who has delivered food to every house on this estate to make sure that they were all okay, even though she was a vulnerable person herself. It's just been absolutely humbling, and I will forever be grateful for the way this has gone, the way that the staff have stepped up to the plate, and for yourself and the Deputy as well, for holding our cabinet meetings at least 2-3 times a week, sometimes more, to make sure that we're all up to speed. If there's any issues, we can bring them to you immediately. There's no waiting, it's just there on the button. I just want to say thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Giles.
Thanks, Leader. I'll make some comments in a while about schools specifically, but I just wanted to echo those comments really. The fantastic volunteering in our communities. People have stepped up to the plate. They've, on the whole, done their best to keep everyone safe and well. And the staff, again, have been tremendous. When you think about all the changes that have to be introduced, all the legislation and the policies, the legal implications, the IT, all of it to enable everything to continue. And on the whole, it's been a fantastic achievement. And I think you see that from the support actually that the residents have for an understanding for the council's responsibilities and how we're having to adapt. So I would just like to add my thanks and congratulations too.
Thank you. Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. It was fortunate in many ways that we were technologically advanced as a council when this crisis hit, because if we hadn't have been, we'd have been chasing our tails like a lot of other councils have. We already had all the technology in place. And as soon as this crisis hit, the practice that we've been using on Teams and video conferencing and other means came straight in. We were the leading council in Wales, if not the UK, in communicating with staff. We had more staff than any other council who were already at home but continuing with the work. The other major advantage that we had was the fact that we set up the 4 hubs just before this crisis. If we hadn't have done that, I don't know where we would have been, because they have been at the heart of all the communities and as they were intended at our most vulnerable communities. And the way that they have worked in that first couple of days, when there was no leadership from the national government in Westminster, we had no idea what we were doing. The supermarkets were closed, vulnerable old people were stuck at home with no food. They hit the road running there, and they've kept going and making it even better now. So I don't know what would have happened. There would have been a lot more deaths, I think, and not just from COVID, if it hadn't been for the hubs. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Mayor. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Leader. I think, again, it's reiterating everyone's thanks to the staff because they worked incredibly hard. But the 2 particular areas where I was especially aware of was firstly the homeless in Newport and how rapidly our teams worked hard to ensure that those people who are especially vulnerable were made safe and were taken off street. And I know that what we actually did with the Newport was seen as sector leading practice. And in addition, it was the way that our finance teams responded to ensuring that our businesses were financed to enable them to continue functioning whilst they saw the staff were being furloughed, etc. Because again, I think we move far more rapidly than other local authorities within Wales. And I think that's commendable, and that shows how hard work everybody worked together as a local authority to coalesce and bring thoughts together how we can actually support those best in Newport. Thank you.
Thanks. Would anybody else like to comment on that at this time? Councillor Cochrane.
I really don't want to. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I don't want to repeat what everybody says, but I think what has been interesting is there's been no demarcation on jobs here, and we've had a lot of people. We were talking about people in their own sort of silos in some respects, but they've moved out there. We've got admin people working in the caring now, delivering food to people's homes and the vulnerable. So I think that's what I wanted to mention, that there's, people across the authority now have forgotten where they work at the moment, and they said, what can we do? And a lot of them are in different jobs they've never ever done before, and they stepped up to the plate. So it's just echoing everybody said, but the demarcation hasn't been there with jobs, and that's great.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rahman.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, I don't want to echo what, I don't want to repeat, sorry, what everyone has said. I want to echo what they've said. A great job done by not only our staff at the council, but also by our partners as well across the city, and especially the charities that have helped our residents that have really been a need. But in particular, I want to thank our residents as well, because a lot of people have stepped up to the plate and given their own time to given their own. I think there's some cross interference there.
Turn on desktop notifications.
I'll just carry on, Leader.
Yes.
Yeah, so basically, I just wanted to thank our residents in particular who have given their free time during the lockdown period as well to help out the charities and help out our most vulnerable in our city as well. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to comment at this stage? So, on a personal note, I would also like to thank all of the elected. Excuse me a minute. So, colleagues, can you mute if you're not speaking, please? Thank you. To continue, I'd like to thank all of the elected members of Newport City Council, of all political parties and groups. At the very outset, the leaders of all political groups in Newport agreed that we would put aside our political differences and we would work together to support the response to the COVID crisis. I'm really pleased to report to you, colleagues, that we've done exactly that during this period. We've maintained regular contact and we've been able to discuss issues and address issues that have arisen from our members. We've worked closely together to ensure that this really has been a one Newport response to the crisis. In terms of partnership, I'd also like to thank our partners across the One Newport Public Services Board. This has been a collective response here in Newport, and we've worked very closely together. And the benefits of our close partnership working and the positive relationships that we've got with our partners have been very apparent during this period as well. So I'd also like to formally place on record my thanks to the members of the One Newport Public Service Board. We've had an opportunity to reflect on the response and certainly to make our thanks and make a formal record of our thanks. But at this stage, I'd like to invite Beverly Owen into the meeting and ask Beverly if she'd like to comment at all, because her strong leadership has been at the forefront of our response in terms of the way that officers have dealt with this across the city. And I'd just like to ask Bev if there's any reflections that you would like to make, Beverly, on behalf of the staff, or anything that you would like to add to the discussion so far.
Thank you, Leader. First and foremost, I've got to say a huge thank you to colleagues. I would echo your thanks to the senior team who worked extremely hard over the last 12 weeks. But also as cabinet members have raised, also a huge thank you to the wider staff team, so to our care staff, those working in schools, the hubs, street cleansing teams, recycling. The response has been quite overwhelming in some respects and inspiring, to say the least. I think when we had a discussion about recovery at the One Newport Public Service Board, my reflections when Cabinet agreed for us, at the end of Cabinet, we went into emergency powers. Certainly for us as officers who've worked in local government for a significant length of time, it was an eerie period. It felt really strange not to be continuing the democratic process in our normal way. But we've worked well together. I would like to thank all members, Leader, Deputy Leader, all members, for their support and patience during what has been a very challenging time as well. I think we've worked well together. I think that we've managed to maintain communication effectively, and we've taken some really difficult and challenging decisions to support the community through the COVID pandemic. So I'd just like to conclude with a final word of thanks both to the people of Newport, all of our staff and to members, and finally partners as well, and the volunteers that have worked so hard to help us get through this crisis to the stage we have. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think, colleagues, what this discussion really evidences is that this is a collective response, and the strength, it emphasises the strength that we've had when we've worked together across the city at all levels, and we've really tried really hard to look after each other and keep each other safe. So to the citizens of Newport, thank you very much for that. And in the interests of the citizens of Newport, we've identified 4 strategic recovery aims that will help us provide a focus to move forward and really focus our priorities for this year. Now, the strategic recovery aims don't replace, but they do support our corporate plan. And when services and our partners are ready, we'll continue to deliver the plan. So what we've been able to do is align our strategic recovery aims very closely to the aspirations of that plan. The first is to understand and respond to the additional challenges that COVID has presented. So we know as we start to move through this recovery period, many of our citizens will experience loss of employment. Businesses will have experienced an impact. And we know that the progress, achievements and well-being of both mainstream and vulnerable learners will have been affected by this as well. We also seek, through our aims, to understand and respond to the impact of COVID-19 on the city's economic and environmental goals, to enable Newport to thrive again. We seek to promote and protect the health and well-being of our people, safeguarding the most vulnerable, and building strong and resilient communities. And we also seek to provide people with the resources and support that they need to move out of the crisis, considering in particular the impact that COVID-19 has had on our minority and marginalised communities. Our 4 strategic aims will be focusing on building on the positive work that has been undertaken across the council, but also acknowledging the further work that's required by both the council and our partners to address the areas that have been impacted most in this crisis. For example, the long-term sustainability of the social care sector, emerging unemployment, and also the inequality and poverty that COVID-19 has highlighted across our communities in Newport and has particularly impacted on our Black and minority ethnic community here in our city. With this in mind, we're working very closely with officers and partners to reinstate services, to introduce support and continue to work towards the new normal as it's being phased. So we are looking at a phased reopening of our libraries, supporting the reopening of cultural and leisure facilities, and the safe return to businesses. I was really pleased myself yesterday to go along to the city centre to see the measures that we've put in place as a city council, but also to see the work that the Newport Now bid has been doing on ensuring that their members, independent businesses, are enabled to function safely, and the work that Kingsway and Friars Walk have done on this. I was particularly pleased to meet the manager of Debenhams, to look around Debenhams and look at the what they've done in terms of helping people to access their store, but also particularly pleased to be able to welcome them back to business here in Newport after the difficult period that they've been through. Those of us who are school governors, we will have been meeting with our head teachers and having discussions around the progress that schools are making in terms of planning for the pupils to return to school, and we as a local authority have been supporting schools on this phased return. What I'd like to highlight in this meeting is that in order to support the delivery of the strategic recovery aims, the Council is going to undertake a community impact assessment that will assess and address the impacts of COVID-19 across Newport's communities and will help inform the future direction of the Council's priorities and actions. So we will be undertaking this assessment, and this will help us. In terms of delivering these strategic aims and the relationship between Council services moving forward, service areas will review and revise their service plans to support the delivery of the strategic aims, and this will be monitored and reported throughout the year in the normal way through our scrutiny process, and we look forward to reinstating that process and enabling us to do that. Our communications team is supporting the promotion of the strategic recovery aims to all stakeholders and communities in Newport. So you will see on social media some points made and some information shared on some of the issues that we've discussed today. And for those colleagues in the packs for the meeting, you will see that we've prepared an infographic which highlights the key points arising from these. Now, alongside all of this work, there's also a need to safely restore our council services, a safe working environment for staff, councillors and service users. We also understand that there is a need to restore the governance and democratic process in order to ensure that there is accountability and transparency in decisions being made. As I mentioned at the start of the meeting, colleagues, under our constitution, we were able to move very swiftly to emergency powers and delegate decision-making to senior officers in order to enable efficient and effective decision-making at the start of this crisis. During this period, Welsh Government have also revised the local government regulations, and this will enable us to undertake council meetings remotely. Following this meeting, we will be able to look at ways of reintroducing other council meetings for the future. So what we're going to ask as a cabinet, colleagues, what we need to ask our democratic services team to do is to consider this, to consider how we can best reintroduce the full range of council meetings in a safe way and an appropriate way. And I'm going to ask for a paper to come to the next full cabinet meeting, which considers how we will introduce virtual meetings across our council meetings, a work programme which enables us to understand the phased reintroduction of full council meetings, details of a training programme for elected members in order to ensure that all elected members are equipped with and have the opportunity to develop the skills in order to use the technology to enable them to participate effectively. And a protocol for virtual meetings across the City Council. Hopefully, we'll be able to have a more detailed discussion about this at our next full cabinet meeting, and this will mark the start of the new normal for elected members as well as we move forward in the virtual environment as well. So I've highlighted there some issues that that are important in terms of our strategic recovery aims. But there's quite a lot of information in that document. And so what I'm going to do now is ask Cabinet colleagues if you would like to comment or make any observations on the strategic recovery aims that are outlined in the document. Councillor Giles.
Oh, thank you, Leader. Yes, well, I'd just like to comment on the opening of schools, because clearly that's the next stage in regard to education, the next major stage. Following the Minister of Education's announcement, a huge amount of outstanding work has been undertaken by this authority, as you've already spelt out. Also, the Gold Command, of course, which was set up for the COVID-19 emergency. Education officers, including regular contact and liaison with head teachers, school staff, governors, unions and the EAS in order to support the Welsh Government guidance on returning children to school back to school and staff. And also, of course, the National Continuity of Learning Plan needs to be implemented as well. So a huge amount of work being undertaken. Virtual meetings, fact sheets and documents have been developed, and the EAS has also developed a number of support and advisory packages, including its playlist, which has been very, very successful, I understand. As Cabinet member, I've also attended Welsh Local Government Association meetings with Cabinet members from across Wales, which have included the Minister of Education, Qualification Wales and WJC. I thank everyone for their commitment and congratulate you on your achievements to date. And now your preparation for providing the best possible support to children and families on the return to school. Well-being will, of course, remain a major priority. As you're all aware, throughout the crisis, schools have continued to support children of key workers, as mentioned earlier, and vulnerable children, including BAME, and I believe Newport has provided the highest number of support hubs in the region. A major priority, of course, has been supporting schools in developing distance learning and ensuring digitally excluded learners have been provided with the necessary equipment. This has involved, I understand, more than 770 devices and also 1,200 Wi-Fi units to enable access to the internet. I thank all our young people, parents, guardians, and recognise it has not been an easy time. I know that's an understatement, and a time of great change. But the work undertaken across the board has proved to be a good basis for the blended learning that will be needed to support pupils for the foreseeable future. And this will continue as we prepare schools and pupils for September. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Leader. I think one of the first things we have to say actually is one of the inadvertent benefits that we actually got from this horrendous disaster that befell our city as well as our nation and the world was the fact that actually what we've actually had with the reduction of traffic and changes being made is actually an improvement in air quality and therefore, a reduction in our carbon footprint. We're aiming to be carbon neutral as a city by 2030, and that's one of our clear ambitions. And this has certainly been of benefit. And what we've actually got to do is work now to ensure that that advantage that we've gained in this period of time that we work upon. Another advantage has been completely inadvertently is the reduction in our grass cutting. We're an accredited bee-friendly city, and this has certainly enabled our wildlife to sort of grow this summer, and we certainly are seeing the benefit of it now. Another aspect of my portfolio is clearly looking at poverty and the impact of poverty in relation to Recovery Aim 4 and the community impact assessment, which the leader referred to, and work with officers has certainly started upon that. And it's to get a good understanding of the impact and the greatest impact of COVID-19 that has been on our most vulnerable in our population, and that relates to those of an ethnicity who are already in poverty, those with poor health, those with disability, and of course those with a different sexuality. It's been very made clear as well already that those who are affected most by unemployment, which has hit Newport, has been our young adults who already potentially were in transient employment, and they've already found themselves again in unemployment, future unemployment, and it's going to be that work we've got to do with those individuals to find sustainable employment that will benefit them for long term, and that is work that we're going to have to focus on in the future. Another concern that we have got is for those individuals in those aspects of our community is that we're moving into a greater digital age, which we are celebrating, but for those people and those individuals, they have huge issues with accessing that because of the cost of that. We understand that most people in poverty actually use pay-as-you-go provision, and yes, it's great that we provided dongles, etc., for many of our children, but for many parents, they're already finding a greater proportion of their weekly income is going on supporting, ensuring that their children are getting the education they absolutely need. So there's a lot of focus we have to need to ensure that there's equitability and of access to our digital future, which is going to be a consequence of this pandemic, and as it redefines our future in Newport. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. We've done a lot of work. People may not see it because a lot of it has gone on in the background. We had to close the cemeteries initially, purely on the basis of preserving life, as you've already explained. But what I am pleased to say is our parks are now open full-time hours, with just a restriction on the play equipment, and I would appeal to parents to please refrain from your children on the play equipment for the time being, purely because we're not sure really how this COVID is going to react on metal surfaces, for example. The libraries, we're looking to open Central Library in the coming days. However, we already have the click and collect. We have the guys going out in the van, dropping books off, picking books up. So, we're doing what we can do. And I'm sure quite a few will be very pleased to know we're also looking to open our transporter bridge back up, given that you can socially distance on the transporter bridge. So the sooner that's open, I feel it'll be more like normal when we see that going back and forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Deputy Leader.
Yes, thank you, Leader. A couple of points I'd like to raise. Firstly, just following on from Councillor Davis's comments regarding air quality and active travel. We have been successful in some bids to Welsh Government to look at active travel projects of cycling and walking throughout the city. They have just come back and we're now working through the detail with that. They include 20-mile-an-hour speed limits on different parts of the city. I need to touch on obviously the waste and recycling, and yes, I've already said a big thanks to the team there from the waste and recycling, certainly from Waste Savers. I think those guys work under tremendous pressure. But obviously, as we're all aware, we had to close the HWRC site to redeploy staff for health and safety issues. But there was still work went on there, and for people that have visited that site through the pre-booked system that we introduced. I was actually there yesterday under a booking that I'd made. How fabulous that is now, and I did take a few minutes, obviously at socially distanced aspects, to chat to a few of the staff there who believe it's a very good system and should continue. So we will be looking at ways that we can continue that booking service. Although I am aware that the 9 till 5 operation of most people's days doesn't incorporate the booking facility there. Cemeteries, again, I have to comment on that. They were closed and initially reopened on a weekend. We have had a lot of deaths through this COVID, just to put it bluntly, and the amount of people that we've had to retrain, redeploy. in cemeteries to do the inevitable business of digging graves. We couldn't operate that with the public anywhere near that machinery. We have now opened on the weekends, and we will open to the public by pedestrian access on weekday mornings very shortly. So in all of that, I think that these guys have done a fabulous job. Most councils actually suspended some waste collections, whether that be orange lidded bins, etc., for garden waste. We kept it all going, and I think that that's a fabulous achievement for our staff in Newport City Council. And again, I'd just like to say, regarding your visit to Debenhams, leader, and the work that was done around their rate relief scheme to bring Debenhams back online, I think that's a credit to all in your NCC. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Cochrane.
Thank you, Leader. If I could sort of hone in on sort of recovery aim 3, which really covers a lot of my sort of portfolio, although everything affects all of us, doesn't it, really, as a city. But when you think about some of the things that we've been doing during this period of time, you know, there's nearly 600,000 of childcare sessions that have been taking place in the city with food parcels. But one of the issues, I think, has been the pressure on children's services, because safeguarding and mental health has gone up by nearly a third. And obviously, with lockdown, that can be a tremendous pressure on the authorities. So a lot of social workers working from home, there's a pressure from them in a lockdown, obviously, because they feel quite obviously in a lockdown situation as well. But what it's allowed us to do in some respects is look at different ways of working. If you think about Oakland's Respite, which is our most vulnerable disabled children, obviously we couldn't fill that in for everybody because of the social distancing. Some of the staff then have been going out to the homes, obviously with all protective equipment, and they've been doing the respite in the carers' homes with the children. So we're thinking, if that's a way of working, we've started doing domiciliary care for children now, where we've used it before as an agency. We're doing it from ourselves now, so we're working within the authority now, working our own domiciliary care, so to speak, with disabled children and vulnerable children. And that's working quite well, and I think maybe we can move forward on that. On the personal protective equipment that we had, I think we were very fortunate where a lot of authorities were criticised because they didn't have it. We had some stock in some of our residential homes, and so we were in front really compared to other authorities. We also supplied some of the care homes, the independent sector, because they would run out where you've seen on the television and the media, a lot of authorities and governments, the care homes, they didn't have enough equipment. We didn't have that in Newport. I wasn't aware of it, and I'm talking to officers. We didn't have that pressure, so we were able to give, I think it was 400,000 of masks and visors, 400,000 of them. And I think there was this relationship we had with the care homes, and I think they were really supportive and thanked us for making sure that they had all that personal protective equipment. Unfortunately, obviously, we know we had quite a few deaths in the independent residential homes. Fortunate for us as well, we didn't have any in our own homes. I don't know if you can relate to that either way, but you know, it's quite successful really, the way that relationship has worked. So I think if we think about where we're going next, I think our pressure is really on the safeguarding, and that's what's worrying me now, because our safeguarding hub, the pressure being put on that now with families now, and I think lockdown might, when it's lifted, might put a bit of pressure. But when you think of some of these families maybe in high-rise flats with 2 or 3 children, the pressure there must be absolutely tremendous, certainly when some family even got garden spaces. So yes, we got to move forward, we got to go forward on the social, but I just like to thank all the staff in the social service. They've worked tremendously hard, and the pressure they've been put under over this has been exceptional, and I think it's something that we got to thank, like you're thanking all your staff in each area. I just like to thank the social services as well.
Thank you. Councillor Rama.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to just pick up on a few points there, and also just wanted to thank a few people. I mean, first of all, with regards to the most vulnerable in our city, the homeless people, how we've managed to work with organisations such as the Salvation Army, Pobl, Wallich, Eden Gate, and the Olive Branch, just to name a few, to find temporary accommodations and provide meals and health checks to support the homeless in our city, which is really important, to be honest with you, because it's helped us to ensure that this COVID-19 didn't affect them in a negative way, because they were the most likely to be affected by this, but we managed to find them appropriate accommodations and provide them with the support. So I am really happy that the council are committed to the partnership, working with the organisations I mentioned to mitigate the effects of COVID-19 on those vulnerable people there. But I also want to pick up on a couple of other points that my colleagues have already discussed. First of all, I mean, with regards to the schools, as we all know, some of our schools have already been open, supporting the children of key workers and vulnerable children as well. And my thanks goes out to those teachers. I'm sure Councillor Giles would also thank them as well. And as a council as well, we've committed, we've supported children that have been digitally excluded by providing 770 devices and over 1,200 Wi-Fi units to enable them to access the internet, which has been absolutely brilliant. And just to sort of reiterate some other points there with regards to technology, that the fact that the council has still been open and answering residents' calls. We've taken over 43,000 calls in this period through the virtual contact centre, and 7,900 customer accounts have been set up as well, which is absolutely amazing, which means that there's real engagement between the residents and the council, especially in this period when everyone's been in lockdown. And that's been possible thanks to our staff, our workforce, who have been able to go from working in our office to working from home. And that switchover has been absolutely amazing. I mean, it could have gone one or two ways. It could have gone really badly, but thankfully it went the other way. It went really, really well, because we were able to, with the help from the shared resource services, we were able to get our staff to work from home, conduct meetings from home, but also make sure that they were answering calls from the residents as well. And that's reflected in the way we've been able to sort of respond as elected representatives, because as Councillor Harvey has said earlier, we've been meeting quite regularly on an informal basis as a cabinet, 2-3 times a week over this period, and we've been able to liaise sort of grassroots concerns with you, Leader, which has absolutely been brilliant and helped a lot of our residents. Just some other points I just want to quickly raise, if possible, Leader, with regards to the sort of recovery aims that's in the report there. First of all, I mean, I just want to mention the support that's been given to the BME community, the ethnic minority and diverse community that we have in Newport have been greatly affected by COVID-19, as we've seen in the news and elsewhere across the country, where deaths have been quite staggeringly high, unfortunately, within the BAME community. So on that basis, the work that the council have done has been absolutely amazing, working with partners, with the police and health service, Welsh Government as well, in supporting our diverse community. We've established a strong network of groups and organisations now at grassroots level to disseminate information. There's weekly newsletters that goes out targeted towards the BME community to provide them with help and support in getting through this pandemic, and also making sure that the risk of contracting COVID-19 is very, very low. We've also got staff within the council who are children who are also in vulnerable groups, and we've set up support networks to help them, especially the BME staff as well, which has been really brilliant. And I've heard some good reviews from those people. But also, I just want to pick up on what's been happening in the news and the support that's been given to our community with regards to community cohesion, with Black Lives Matters as well. We've been in constant contact with the police with regards to hate crime and exploitation and other sort of issues that have arisen, but also that we've been in contact with Race Council Cymru East, Eton Community House as well, and other charities that have been working on community cohesion, in particular Maindy Unlimited in my ward, who are working on getting Maindy Library up and running to support our community again. So I just wanted to just raise a few points that what the council have been doing and working with others, what we've achieved during this pandemic.
Thank you, Councillor Rahman. And can I just say I'm really pleased that you mentioned some of the work that we've been doing with our Black and minority ethnic communities across the city. I'm really pleased to share with colleagues that I'll be having a roundtable discussion with the organiser of the Black Lives Matter march and protest in Newport and representatives of the Black and minority ethnic community, in order that we can continue this dialogue and keep the momentum and keep any actions that Newport City Council needs to undertake, keep them fully at the forefront of the agenda moving forward. So thank you for raising that. Councillor Giles.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to make a reference to aim 3 with supporting families, and follow on mainly, obviously, from Paul's comments in regard to schools. Schools keep a very close eye on their children. They know their children well. And we have, of course, had a system where the police have been working much closer with schools, so identifying children at risk and events that have happened. And they inform the schools very quickly now, which is fantastic. But that has continued during this period where the schools have been closed, although, of course, the vulnerable children that have been identified are in the hubs. But there have been new pupils, as you can imagine, during this difficult time that have been identified as vulnerable. And I understand all those ones that are identified have been referred to social services, so that will reflect in those figures. But the main issue going forward, or one of the main issues going forward, is safeguarding with IT. Because clearly, if you've got distance learning and you are teaching children one-to-one or speaking to them, there are it's very intricate and complicated in regard to ensuring safety with regard to that. So that work goes on, but clearly it will be overcome, because that's how lessons are going to have to be and learning is going to have to be for some time to come. And the other thing I just wanted to mention briefly was the voucher scheme, which appears to have been very successful. And of course, that's been organised via the schools. So vouchers could be picked up by the schools. It's been a huge amount of work all round. I think organising it's run very well. And I'd just like to thank everyone involved, and particularly head teachers who have, I suppose, had the brunt of it in many ways. And of course, arrangements for provision will continue through August. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to come back in on community regeneration. Our 4 community area hubs in Ringland, Mays Glass, the information station and Malpas Court House have remained open throughout all of this. And for those that are vulnerable, it's not always easy to do over the phone, so they had somewhere to go to get face-to-face assistance, which I found invaluable, to be honest with you. We've used Welsh Government food parcels. We've got them delivered out to communities. Our flying starts have all remained open right across the city, all 10 settings, which again is testament to the staff. They really have stepped up. For my ward, my residents are very, very happy with what we've provided. And I get the general feeling that's right across the board. Yes, we have upset some, and there has been upset with funerals and the limited amount of people going to the churches. However, that was not guidance set out by us. That was guidance we were told to follow, which once people understood that, they kind of accepted it. And again, it was nothing to make life harder than it already is and has been, and no doubt will continue to be. It was because we were instructed that's what must happen. I would, as Chair of Governors for Lamwerne High, like to pass my thanks to Mrs. Jarvis, our head, because for those children who couldn't access the Wi-Fi and everything else, they printed off hard copies and delivered them to the pupils' homes, which no doubt every school has done across the board, but I can only talk for my own school at Lamwerne. Again, the faculty have really pulled the stops out. I am incredibly proud of our teaching staff. They have been amazing. They really have. Everyone in general has, in these uncertain and unprecedented times, they've stood up and said, okay, fine, we can't do it this way, let's find a way that we can do it, which for me has been like a breath of fresh air. It's been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Leader. I'm just coming in to support Councillor Harvey and the comments she's made very specifically in relation to the community hubs, in that we have actually evidence that over 700 food parcels have been delivered to support our most vulnerable in our communities, and there's been additional financial support that's been given to our food banks of up to £30,000. And this has enabled this distribution of food parcels. There's been work with the community groups to ensure that food distribution was equitable throughout the community, and the food supplied suited those who needed it most, such as for our BME community, if they really looked at food provision and what was appropriate. In addition to that, I think we need to thank Newport City Homes, who are able to arrange the logistical support for the food bank, because they were able to deliver those bulk orders. So I think a lot of thanks needs to go out to those communities, how everyone pulled together to make these things happen. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks. Deputy Leader.
Yes, thank you, Leader. We talk about where we are now in the recovery and what we've been through, and not forgetting that Iron Bevan Health Board was one of the worst affected areas of, that were hit within the country. But in regards to our parks closing and opening, our cemeteries closing and opening, the HRWC site closing and opening, this has been done through real vigorous risk assessment, and that's how we've gauged and worked towards this recovery. And I believe it's testament to that risk assessment as to where we are now within the Iron Bevan Health Board. We were one of the worst affected areas in the country. And when we're climbing out of that now, COVID hasn't gone away, we all understand that. But one thing I wanted to say, and it was a backup again from a school's point of view, is the work that the staff and the head teachers have done behind the scenes, working in hubs, preparing packs for children, taking out IT equipment, and then over the last 3 weeks preparing school to reopen for the 3 weeks leading up to the summer term. I was at school yesterday because as a chair of governors, we're looking to sign off, make sure everything's right. We do that as governors because we care about our children. And the work that's been done, especially in my school in St Andrews, is phenomenal from what and they've covered every aspect of one-way systems of how children need to get out in case of emergency, evacuation, etc., etc. So testament to those for that. But I think also testament from where we are now regarding COVID and the risk assessment steps that we took to ensure the safety of the public of this city. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Truman.
Well, thank you, Leader. Yeah, it's most all been said, but Newport really did step up to the plate. They really did, and they responded magnificently, as colleagues have said, because they were putting themselves at risk to some degree because they were out delivering food parcels, medication from the word go, and the message that's come out for me clearly from people I talked to. Newport has been up and running from day one. Yes, we had to make some restrictions on certain things, parks and things like that, but that was being done with scientific advice and risk assessment. So again, it's all been said, but Newport did step up to the plate, and they always seem to do that. Can I say, as a Newport citizen, excellent.
Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Cochrane.
Thank you, Leader. I wanted to pay tribute actually to our community connectors as well, because I think that I meant to say it last time really, because obviously they've been supportive of the carers through this process, and normally the carers can give us quite a hard time, but they've been very supportive. We've had some lovely letters off them, the way that there's 550 handbooks and carers packs have been given to them all, and they've even gone out and got medication for some of the people that can't leave because they've been shielding at home. So they've really stepped up to the mark, the community connectors, and as a nice gesture as well from the social services, children's services, because of all the foster carers were sent flowers. And the letters we've had from the foster carers over having that sort of gift really that they had. They honestly, you see some of the letters, and some of them stopped me and said they weren't expecting it, but it was a lovely gesture, and that says a lot really for what we're doing for our foster carers.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. So, colleagues, we've had an opportunity to discuss at length, and rightly so. We should take our time to discuss this, the response and the proposed recovery in detail. We've had an opportunity to discuss our strategic recovery aims, and as a Cabinet, we're being asked to endorse the strategic recovery aims that will enable us to ensure that the council services continue to recover and operate, while supporting our strategic aims set out in our corporate plan. And members are content to endorse these aims. And if you are, can I just ask you, can you just click on the hand symbol so I can just see that as we to see that everybody's happy with that. Okay, that's great. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you very much for that. So, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda today, which is the economic impact and recovery strategy. So as you'll find this on pages 13 to 34 of your packs. As you recall, colleagues, it really doesn't seem that long ago since we adopted our revised economic growth strategy. It's only very recently that it's been refreshed. And I think, in fact, it was February that we looked at that as a Cabinet. And when we looked at our economic growth strategy, we recognised that Newport had become a more competitive city, that we had a growing influence in high value sectors and a rapidly expanding tourism sector. As colleagues will be very much aware that the Prime Minister's announcement of lockdown on the 23rd of March effectively shut down huge swathes of our economy. And what this did was, as a consequence, it necessitated unprecedented intervention from the UK government and the Welsh government to mitigate the worst of the economic damage that a prolonged lockdown would bring. Over 2,000 of our Newport businesses alone have received over £26 million in grant support. It's been a huge effort in terms of our officers here to support the businesses, and I really would like to thank the work that our finance colleagues have done and our business support colleagues have done, and the Regeneration team, because they've made a tremendous effort in terms of supporting businesses. And I would like to add to that we've received a number of very, very positive letters, communications and feedback from the business community of the speed and the pace at which we were able to get this money out to support the businesses. So once again, thanks to officers for that. Nonetheless, the lockdown has had and continues to have quite a significant impact on businesses across the country. And what this means for us is that economically, Newport is now in a very different place. If we look across Wales, it's predicted that unemployment is expected to rise from 3.2% to over 7.3%. And we know that the UK economy shrank by 20.4% in April. It is reported that we're now predicted to be on the brink of the worst recession for 3 centuries. This is really, really difficult information to process. The scale of it, the scale of the impact is very, very difficult to try and process. Nonetheless, we've got an important role to play as a city council. And in order to recover and reposition ourselves in Newport, we need to identify areas that our economy will require support. We need to also, and this is very important, identify where there are new opportunities and how we can shape the new normal with our businesses and investors. So how can we work together collaboratively to do whatever we can to mitigate the impact and to really identify new areas of growth going forward? We've got an important role to play in that, colleagues. So the strategy that we have in our packs will form an addendum to our agreed and adopted economic growth strategy. It proposes 3 key areas of focus. So these are recovery, repositioning and renewal. The recovery is the focus on short-term recovery, on the work that we're doing, supporting businesses to ensure that they claim all the grants and financial support available, how we support those new opportunities, and making sure that all the interventions are appropriate, efficient, and most of all, timely. And we've mentioned earlier, about the timeliness of getting that money out to businesses to support them. We need to continue with these timely interventions. Moving forward, we need to consider the medium term, and during the medium term, the considerations really will be around repositioning. We need to focus on continuing to attract inward investment and be really clear about what the city has to offer in terms of quality of life and employment opportunities. It's important within this that we accelerate improvements to our digital infrastructure to support increased levels of home working and grow the education and skills offer available too. And that's to both our workforce as a city council, but also the workforce across the whole of Newport. How we support and enable people to adapt to the new normal going forwards is going to be really important. Longer term, we do have to think about renewal, and this is what the strategy asks us to do. So we need to consider repositioning Newport in a new world where there'll be opportunities to rebalance the economy with the environment and society to give us greater resilience and improved well-being for our residents, not just now, but in the future as well. In doing so, our approach is going to be very much about a partnership approach, and we'll work with all our partners, including the Cardiff Capital Region and the Western Gateway, to ensure that Newport emerges in a stronger and more resilient position. I have no hesitation at all in presenting this strategy to you, with a recommendation that we endorse it and start our journey to economic recovery. And I wonder if at that stage, colleagues, whether you would like to come in and comment on the economic recovery strategy. Councillor Mayor, do you want to comment, Dave?
I didn't have my hand up. Oh, it's still up, was it? Okay. No, these are unprecedented times, Leader, and we've got no idea of what's going to happen. But we will be at the heart of it. We've always been at the heart of it because we are the mainstay of society in Newport. The businesses come and go. We support them wherever we can, and we're a constant. And that's all I'd like to say. That and it's going to be tough, but I think we are best placed to help everybody.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Mayor. So colleagues, can I just ask before we move forward with the discussion, if your hand is still up from the last resolution, but you don't wish to comment on this paper, could you put it down, please? Otherwise, we'll move on. Councillor Truman. Are you on mute, Ray?
Agree with what's been said, Leader. Going to be some tough times, and you know, we always get through it. That's the thing, and we will get through it. That's the thing. You know, as I say, there'll be a lot of challenges along the way, and the council will do all it can to help start the economy in Newport, and we will do that the best we can. But as I say, it's going to be a new world. Basically, it's going to be difficult, challenging, but we'll get there. We always do, and we will do it again.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cochrane. You're on mute, Paul.
I think you summed it all up, Leader, actually. It says sometimes these areas of difficult times give us opportunities, and I think sometimes we got to look for where those opportunities are, because obviously we can't do the same old. That's not going to happen at the moment. We just got to look after the vulnerable. When you mentioned about 7 million, I know that's across the UK. It's frightening, isn't it? It's frightening numbers. And when you think about people on benefits, they're not the best payment, are they? Let's be perfectly honest. And to how some people live on their benefits, I don't really understand. So yes, these opportunities must come, and I think you've mentioned it, and we just got to grab them where we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Leader. I think we have to recognise that in Newport, historically, we are an ex-industrial area. We've been reliant on several big employers, and consequently, we have had huge issues in regard to unemployment in Newport. And there's been more recent reliance and development of our service sector, which relates to hairdressing, our hospitality services, our restaurants, and those are the ones that are being most hardest hit by COVID-19 at the moment. And that is why our youngest people, our young adults in Newport, have been hardest hit by suddenly finding themselves unemployed. We also have within Newport huge links with the digital economy, and I think given that we are going to become more of a digital nation, I think we really have to focus and look how we can support those industries within Newport to ensure that our residents actually get actively engaged and employed by those industries. There are certainly definitely ways forward that we can look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Giles.
Thanks, Leader. Actually, that just leads into my point, really, with regard to NEETs. Because obviously this is absolutely vital work to support them, and we've had years of really good results with NEETs. Very low numbers of young people who haven't been able to get into work or education, you know, really just down to a small handful, if that, actually. So the world has changed considerably, and obviously, as we're all saying, no one can predict what the situation will be, but these young people will certainly be severely affected. And of course, what we also need, as well as businesses, and those ones that you mentioned, Councillor Davis, you are certainly apt, is the support that's required for further education and universities. you know, this is vital as well for those. So clearly with the economic situation, there's massive unemployment potentially, as we're talking about. And these opportunities will be reduced. But I do know that the work continues. We've got very experienced officers, and to find ways of assisting them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Leader. It's just a quick one, really. All of what we've done, all the protections we've put in place, everything we have just been saying thank you to the staff for, all costs money. We're going to hit this recession. We've already had more than 10 years decimated budgets, and I can hear people groaning already, but that is a fact. We have been decimated for more than a decade. There is nothing left, but you know what? We will find a way around it. It's what we do. It's what we always do. We will find a way to serve this city in the best possible way and to make sure our youngsters coming through will have as much opportunity as physically possible to get our youngsters back into work, not just the younger people, my generation in their 50s, get them back into work and get the economy moving. That is and has to be paramount for the survival of our city.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Rahman.
Thank you, Leader. It's just following from what Councillor Harvey said at the beginning. I mean, our priority from the very beginning was to help those in our city to overcome the pandemic. I mean, just to sort of throw some figures out there, we provided financial support of over £30,000 to food banks and supplies with distribution of food parcels. Obviously, that money has to be recouped from somewhere, but that's extra money that we didn't plan on spending at the beginning of the year, let alone last year. Also, the fact that we administrated over £30 million of business grants to 2,250 businesses across Newport just to support them and their families. People forget that the businesses aren't just one person or one organization. You were talking about families behind those businesses as well there. And also the fact that we've had to spend money on things that we didn't think we would need at this time of the year. For example, the PPE, the amount of PPE that we've bought for our care homes is a testament to the fact that we haven't had any deaths in the care homes that we administer that comes under our sort of purview. So I mean, the fact that we bought 289,045 visors and goggles, almost had a Priti Patel moment there with my figures. I do apologise, Leader. 304,000 masks, 406,000, almost 407,000 gloves, 250,000 aprons as well. So a lot of money has been spent on looking after our residents, especially those vulnerable, but also our businesses and the families behind those businesses as well. So it's not a surprise that we are in this situation, but I'm happy that we were able to spend that money protecting our city and our residents. But as you say, Leader, I mean, we need to look forward now. We need to look at innovative ways of how we sort of get out of this pandemic. So fully support what you're saying.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Although you were on mute, but I would imagine you were calling me in there. Yeah, I just up on what Councillor Harvey was saying about finding a way. I think that's very important in the way in which we lead and take this forward. But where we have control, I think page 14 in the last two bullet points there sum it up, that we should ensure that there are no missed or wasted opportunities within our control, but to ensure that those interventions are timely, appropriate and efficient, but they're also well managed, because that's important, not to react in these unprecedented times, but to do it in a timely manner. And I think if we do that, we will come out of this in a good form. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
You're on mute again, Leader.
It's the birds, sorry. So we've had an opportunity to discuss economic recovery and discuss in detail this paper that we presented here. Before I ask colleagues if they're minded to support and endorse this paper, I'd just like to ask Tracy Brooks, who's been at the forefront really of the work on this, if there's any comments she'd like to make.
Thank you, Leader. No, it's just to reinforce the comments that have already been made, in that I think whilst it sounds very much like it's a negative opportunity and we're going to have a lot of issues to address moving forward, I do think that it is definitely an opportunity for Newport to reposition ourselves and to rebalance some of the relationships that we've got between society and the environment. So I think that it really is a unique opportunity for us to shape and influence our new normal. I think officers and members alike are looking forward to that opportunity. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks, Tracy. Bev, would you like to comment?
Yes, please, Leader. Yeah, just, to Tracy and the team have worked really hard to pull this together because this is a really important document for us going forward. And over the course of the last couple of weeks, obviously, we've had to work quite hard with businesses and partners in the city centre to pull the city centre recovery plans together quite quickly. And as you said earlier, you've seen first-hand evidence of that yesterday. But it's not to say that obviously even during the pandemic, officers have not been working on, have had sight on how we're going to recover the economy for the future. And we've got a task and finish group set up with businesses in the city centre, not sort of an operational level. But obviously I'll leave it to you to comment upon your aspirations about how we engage at a strategic level. But just to say, we have been engaging with partners. I've been speaking to some of the key businesses, as have the Regen team, and again, the finance team. So I think, just back to that whole corporate team effort in supporting and sustaining the economy as best we can throughout this period. But really, my view is that we're on the platform to maximise any opportunities that can be derived from what has been, really horrendous time for people. And I just want to give assurance to members, that we'll work already to really support the future of Newport's economy going forward. Leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Bev. So, colleagues, in relation to this, I have to say that for our next Cabinet meeting, we will be having a paper on the Western Gateway and the economic opportunities that may arise through our membership of that. I think that aligns quite nicely to the longer term renewal and the medium term repositioning aspirations of the strategy itself. So, colleagues, are you happy to endorse the strategy?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's absolutely great. Thank you. Brilliant. We move then to item number 5 on the agenda today, which is the financial impact. And I have to say that at the very outset of this, it was really important to me that we had an opportunity to discuss the financial impact at length and in the public domain. During this period, through the Welsh Local Government Association, leaders of local authorities have been meeting regularly. We've been meeting with each other and also been meeting with Welsh Government ministers to discuss the financial impacts. And I think it's really important at this point that I really emphasise and highlight the support that the Minister for Local Government and Housing in Wales, Julie James, has shown for local authorities during this period. She's been absolutely outstanding in terms of raising awareness across Welsh Government of the financial impact that COVID is having on local authorities and local authority services. So I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly thank her for the work that she has done in partnership with us. The report that we're looking at today picks up the 3 key financial issues that result from the COVID-19 situation. So essentially, what we've done as a council to support businesses and vulnerable households and individuals, what all this is forecast to cost and how it's funded, and what this means for our financial outlook this year. So what impact will this have on the council's finances going forward? The situation is very dynamic. The response to this at an all Wales level and what we do locally is changing daily. And the financial impact on our resources, our finances as a local authority is subject to change. And the report itself highlights the current areas of risk and the costs that the council are incurring during this period as well. Now, this may continue to change depending on further responses to the situation. I'd really like to highlight the role that the Welsh Government have played in this, because the Welsh Government have actually responded to this situation with over £2.4 billion of initiatives, and local government have been at the forefront of delivering many of these support schemes. And the report shows, colleagues, that a lot of this has gone to support businesses through the Economic Resilience Fund and through providing rates relief for eligible businesses. In addition, health service capacity is being supported by Welsh Government, and local government is also being funded to provide specific support for free school meal pupils, the homeless and our care providers. So if we consider our position locally as Newport City Council, firstly, in terms of financial support to our businesses and vulnerable individuals and households, as the report shows, we've actioned rate relief of a considerable amount of money to those eligible businesses to ensure that they don't have to pay business rates for this full year. We've also paid out over £28 million of non-repayable grants to around 2,300 businesses to provide short-term financial support while they've been closed during the period. We've been complimented and had some very positive feedback on the pace at which we did this. And in order to react very swiftly to this situation, we actually borrowed some money to get this cash out to businesses as quickly as we could. And by the end of that first week in April, we'd paid out £16 million. We work with many households and we've deferred payments of council tax where people are suffering from financial losses or financial uncertainty during this period as well. We're also forecasting that we'll be spending around £6 million in specific initiatives to support those children who are eligible for free school meals while schools are shut, so to the end of August. On increasing our stock of short-term accommodation provision to support the homeless during this period, and on supporting our care providers with additional financial support to cover their increased costs. There are some really key statistics and facts behind these figures, and these are highlighted in the report. Just to share with you some of these, colleagues, we've distributed over 60,000 food vouchers to eligible families. Over 75 rough sleepers have been offered temporary accommodation and specific support related to that. In addition, 232 families have been offered emergency and temporary housing. And over £900,000 of financial support has been given to care homes to help them meet the increased costs of supporting our older and vulnerable population. And whilst much of this has been funded by Welsh Government, the Council is facing significant financial uncertainty itself through this period. And it is really important that all elected members are aware of this situation, the position that we're in as a local authority, and what this means going forward. So some of the key areas that the report highlights are the costs that are going to be continued to be incurred beyond June, whereas the commitment from Welsh Government to support the funding is only available until June. So as I mentioned at the outset, this is a very fluid and flexible situation, and it does change. But at this stage, we will continue to incur costs in terms of our COVID response and our recovery. But the Welsh Government commitment is only until June. And so this month is a very, very important month for us going forward. During this period, understandably so, we've experienced a significant reduction in our income from fees and charges. Some support has been announced for this already, but the reality is that that's insufficient for the estimated first quarter income losses, let alone the second quarter, knowing from the evidence that's available to us that these are actually not going to bounce back immediately as we move through the recovery period. And it really is important to be mindful of that. So Welsh Government has supported in many ways, and they've made many commitments to us. But even so, the amount of financial resource available to us will not completely cover the losses that we experience as an authority during this period. And this situation is the same for all local authorities across Wales. As well as this, we're also experiencing, as our other authorities, losses in terms of the collection of council tax. Now, our revenues team have taken a very sympathetic approach, and the sympathetic approach will continue. But I have to highlight that council tax is an important source of our overall funding and does need to be collected. We'll do all that we can to continue to help, but we do need to catch up now and really look at this moving forward. And I do ask taxpayers for their understanding and cooperation with us in doing this. Linked to that, and inextricably linked to that particular issue, is the increased cost of our council tax reduction scheme. We encourage all citizens who are eligible for this scheme to come forward for support from it. And I would really continue to encourage all families who are struggling to pay their council tax to look into and apply for this benefit. This is there for you. It is there to help you through moments like this. Please, if you are struggling with your council tax, come forward and we can help you with this. What we don't want is for council tax to become an unnecessary burden when this scheme is there to help avoid that. So it is there for you. It would be remiss of me not to highlight that as an authority, we will experience an increased cost through this scheme, certainly exceeding that which we've budgeted for. But it is really important that citizens understand this is there for you, and you really should. If you are experiencing difficulty, please come forward and we can, if you are eligible for support from the scheme, we will help you with this. On all of these matters and the issues that I've highlighted, we are working closely with Welsh Government, and we're seeking further funding wherever possible. And the Welsh Local Government Association meets regularly on this, so the Treasurers Group meets regularly, and the Cabinet Members, Finance Cabinet Members Group, of which I'm a member, also meets regularly on this. There is a lot of work going on around finance. The situation is changing regularly, and for those reasons, I think there's a lot of uncertainty with our finances this year. Positively, though, we do have a good level of budget contingency and reserves in the last resort to mitigate unavoidable problems. Within this context, though, it's going to be really important moving forward and very necessary for all service areas to manage their core budgets as well as they possibly can. we need to be focused and clear and try to do whatever we can to avoid overspending, as we've seen in the past. Our usual budget monitoring processes are underway, but it's fair to say that these are made quite challenging by this situation. We will, however, as a Cabinet, receive these in due course, and we will have these updates on the budget. To date, Newport City Council's response has been comprehensive and robust. And as we've mentioned, as we've gone through this meeting, essential services have been more or less maintained during this period, whilst we've also been providing additional support to the most vulnerable. This has only been possible, as we've already discussed and already highlighted as we've gone through this meeting. It's only been possible because of the Herculean efforts made by our council staff. So they really have gone above and beyond, and their commitment, I have to say, across all levels of service, their commitment to public service has been absolutely outstanding. And this is true of both individuals and teams. As we've said previously, as a Cabinet, we're very appreciative of this, and we do really appreciate the positive impact that we've been able to have on people's lives in this most challenging of times. We're certainly not out of this situation yet, but we do need to look forward. And as we know, we've highlighted during our discussion, the world has changed, and we continue to be affected and changed by the situation. But we really have to highlight and certainly discuss and raise awareness of how important our financial position is in terms of our response and our recovery, and certainly raise awareness of the implications of this for our finances going forward. And at this point, colleagues, I'd just like to pause and invite colleagues to comment. Councillor Truman, your hand is raised. Would you like to comment on this? You may be on mute, Ray.
You, Leader, yeah, people will be looking to us because we provide the services, and unfortunately, if any services have got to be reduced or cut, we get the blame for it. And this is the danger now, because as you say, local councils have been stabbed with finance for many years, particularly with austerity. Austerity has gone out the window now. In fact, it's like we've been edited. It's like a sort of post-war economy. We need to get through this. You know, we need to kickstart the economy. We need to have more house building. The infrastructure needs to be increased. Manufacturing needs to be increased. Jobs need to be increased, because people oiling people on the door, that's not productive. People need to work. They need to get back to work. They need jobs. They'll pay their taxes and everything else. But the government, the Tory government, cannot go on with austerity, and all the leading economists are saying the same thing. If we really want to kickstart the economy and move forward, we need to give a massive boost to the job market, because it doesn't pay, it doesn't make sense to let people go on the door and no future, no jobs, paying no taxes or not. As I say, austerity is kicked out the window now. We've got to kickstart the economy. And the only way you're going to do that is put money into the economy and put people back to work.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Truman. Councillor Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. We stepped up to the plate when we were asked, and we've done everything that we can in a complete political vacuum. We've done it because we're at the front end, and we, as Ray has just said, we provide nearly all the services directly to people, even businesses. I'm worried though, because Boris Johnson's already shown what his actions are going to be when he tried to put a stop, and he may still have, put a stop on a rise for nurses who have been at the epicenter of this crisis. I mean, that's political ignorance at its height, I think. So I don't share Ray's faith. I agree with his analysis that we do need to approach finances differently, but I do not believe the national government will do that. They don't care, quite frankly. He don't care what happens to us. He's already shown that. So I fear for the future. But we have got excellent staff. We have always acted prudently, and we've always provided the means to keep our head above water. I don't know whether we will be able to do it given the outside pressures in future, but we will plan as we always do and be responsible. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Mayor. Councillor Rama.
Thank you, Leader. It's basically what Councillor Schumer has just been saying. I mean, we've been saying for years, over 10 years of austerity, that this is going to affect the residents of our city really badly if something like this comes about. Obviously, we didn't know that it would be COVID-19, but some sort of disaster, if it came around, we would really suffer. And we are going to be suffering now even longer, I have a feeling. But the thing that we need to realize is there's already talk of this COVID-19 generation. This pandemic has affected many, many of our young people in this city, and they're going to be impacted by unemployment. They're not going to have, they're not going to be able to provide for their families or start their new lives. That's the reality of it. That's the reality of austerity. I don't blame the pandemic, because the pandemic could have come around at any time, in good times or bad times, but if we had the support from the very beginning, we could have managed this a lot better. We've done our best, as we've discussed in this meeting. The amount of support that we've provided to our most vulnerable in the city, and we continue to provide, as well as our businesses, has been astronomical. And I'm just afraid now, going ahead, that unless austerity ends, unless the Conservative government can provide us with financial support, we're going to have more of our young people unemployed and without the ability to start a new life or provide for their families. I mean, we've already got figures showing that in our city, over 16,000 people have been furloughed. That's 16,000 working people have been furloughed, not mentioning their families in the background as well, who rely on those individuals. And with the furlough scheme coming to an end, it's also a worry on whether a lot of those people are going to get their jobs back or not. And there's also the risk to those who are shielding. They're still shielding right now, and they may not be able to return to work, or they might lose their jobs ultimately because of this pandemic. Choosing between employment and staying safe and alive due to COVID-19 is a devastating thing to think about. It really is. And it doesn't help that we're in this situation because the government have been unable and unwilling to invest in local government for over 10 years now. It's really disheartening, Leader, that we haven't had these conversations. But like I said, we've been saying this for years now. We've been saying it since 2010, and since the financial impact started biting. But we need to find ways of how we come forward with this. But we can only do that with the financial support from the UK government. That's the only way I can see us going forward.
Thank you. Thanks. Deputy Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I mean, the figures in this report are huge, but I think we need to reflect on the costs that there are to alterations in the services that we provide, the costs in the alterations to schools, the costs in the alterations to care facilities that we made, the costs in the deployment of staff and further training to which we've deployed them to. And as we come out of this COVID towards the norm, whatever that norm may be, none of us are aware of that at the minute, these costs don't stop, and new costs raise their heads, and they will, and we'll have to deal with that. But this is still without 100% of our workforce through what Councillor Raman has just mentioned regarding shielding, etc. So as we move towards the norm and things are relaxed a bit, that doesn't mean to say that we are anywhere back towards normal as we were at the beginning of March before this pandemic struck. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. We've sat in these meetings on many occasions. We've always said we are at the cold face because we are. It's that simple. They make these rules and then we got to hop to and get on with it. Just for argument's sake, free school meal vouchers, central government wanted to withdraw and was shamed by a 22-year-old footballer into not removing it, into leaving it where it is. Shamed by a young man to put back what should never have even been considered to be taken away. The lack of investment, as Councillor Rahman has said, and Councillor Jevons, is staggering. We have no investment, we have no money. We're there, I feel sometimes we're here for central government, right, go on, off you go. I've decided, now you take it on. And then we get the blame for it. People don't realise it's not us. We are only doing what we've been tasked to do. I think it's time all the other governments all come together, went to central government and demanded proper full funding for all the local authorities. How on earth are we meant to find non-domestic rate relief at 332 million? It's just insane. It's money that we haven't got, money that we haven't been given, and nobody is willing to say, oh, hang on, you know, the money tree in the garden's blooming, I'll go and pick you some. We don't have a money tree. And for once, Myron will be very, very impressed. I'm not even moaning at Myrian. That's normally my go-to man for a kicking. But I'm not even moaning at Myrian today because what he's had to do financially, juggling all these balls and trying to make sure everyone is being taken care of on pretty much a nil budget is absolutely horrendous. And I just wish Mr. Johnson, I had to think then before I spoke, would actually look at what effect he's having on all the local authorities. Just because you may be in a deprived area, it doesn't mean you haven't got the right for a proper education, for a proper life, and to be able to go on and further for better things. And how dare they think that it's okay because it's all right for the rich man, it's never good enough for the poor man. But I'm venting now, so I'm going to turn off.
Councillor Harvey, thank you for your contribution. So as members have highlighted, and for me this is a really important discussion, and as members have highlighted as we've discussed this, prior to COVID, local authorities across the UK were still very much feeling the impact of continued austerity in terms of the funding from Treasury via UK government. So that's been very, very apparent in our discussions. As the paper highlights, Welsh Government have worked really hard with local authorities and tried to do everything that they can to provide support and assistance for us. But as Welsh Government would also point out, they are only able to distribute to local authorities the fundings that they receive as part of the consequential from UK government. So I was very pleased to note yesterday that our MP for Newport East raised exactly this issue with the Prime Minister's question time. And I was also pleased to note that a few weeks ago, Baroness Wilcox also raised the position of local government in the House of Lords. So I'm really pleased that although things are very difficult for us, I'm very pleased that we've got a supportive Welsh Government and at the UK government level in both the House of Parliament and the House of Lords, we've got really strong representation for local government there. And I am truly grateful for that, because when I listen to the experiences of my colleagues in the Local Government Association, of some of the issues that they're facing within the English context, I'm truly grateful for the support that we have got here in Wales. Before I ask you, colleagues, whether you're happy to support this, to note and agree the importance of this paper going forward, I'd just like to invite Myriam in to see if Myriam would like to make any further contribution to this.
Thanks, Leader. Just a couple of things. One is, you know, for those people who are listening to this, or who know people who run businesses that kind of that are listening to this, there's 6 days left before these business grants come to an end. We did a second mail shot a week ago to those businesses who we thought would be eligible but hadn't made an application. And you know, I wouldn't say this unless it had happened a lot of times. The last week or so, the number of business owners who've been on the phones with the revenues team in tears at the wit's end, who suddenly felt as if that there was something out there for them, you know, goes to show you that there's a lot of businesses out there that can still need to apply. So I would just put that plea out as part of this meeting. Just say, if you haven't applied, time is now incredibly short, but there is still time for you to get your application in. That's the first, I think, important thing that I'd like to mention. I think secondly is, as you've said, Leader, it's the uncertainty at the moment. We've got about a half a dozen key financial issues that we're currently talking with Welsh Government about. You'll be aware of them through your conversations with other leaders and ministers in your weekly meeting. We are very keen to resolve and come to a conclusion on these things. It is difficult, so therefore we understand why definitive answers are not possible as quickly as we'd like. But the situation is very much changeable. So we're hoping to get our first forecasting in this week or sort of next week. We'll see what that looks like, but you know, it's very changeable at this point in time. But I think ultimately, if people can look after their core budgets properly, this council does have a revenue contingency and you know, fairly good, strong financial backbone to see its way through the through the issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Bev, would you like to comment?
Yes, please. Thanks, Leader. Yeah, just a couple of comments again to give members reassurance that obviously officers are, you know, whilst we've been going through the pandemic, naturally minds have been very focused on operational demands and the here and now. But we are starting to look towards the medium and long-term future. And the corporate management team, so the head service and myself, next week will be starting to look at the MTFP for 21-22 onwards, which obviously is going to be very different to what we had thought it would be when the accounts and, you know, the sort of MTFP was last finalised. So Myron and Reese will be leading that piece of work, and we've got an hour's discussion next week to kick that work off. So again, just to give reassurance to Cabinet that, you know, that is within our sights.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that, Bev. So, colleagues, we've had an opportunity then to consider the paper and discuss it at length. The paper asks us to note a number of key points, and also to agree that it's the importance of all services operating within their core budgets for non-COVID-19 responses in the forthcoming year. As Bev has highlighted, it is very high on the agenda of officers, and they will be looking at that next week. So, are members content with the report? Are you happy to support the report? That's great. Thank you very much for that. We move on then to the last report on our agenda today, which actually, I think, colleagues, really signifies and highlights the position that we're in terms of recovery. And contact tracing does actually highlight, you know, the position that we're in terms of moving forward and actually learning to live with this virus on a day-to-day basis. So item number 6 on our agenda is COVID-19 contact tracing, and you'll see this on pages 49 to 56 of your packs. The report sets out the work that's been undertaken to date to establish a local contact tracing team in Newport, and also asks Cabinet to formally endorse the urgent action and approach taken by officers to develop and implement the service. And I do know that our colleague, Councillor Truman, the Cabinet member for Regulatory Services, has been working very hard with his team on this. And so, Councillor Truman, would you like to take us through this report?
Thank you, Leader. As you said, Leader, the report sets out the work that has been undertaken to date to establish local contact tracing teams in Newport. The report recognises that these are just interim arrangements for the first 3 months to get the service to operation in an extremely short timescale. A future strategy will need to be agreed in conjunction with other partners to develop a delivery model and governance structure for the longer term. Key to this will be the funding that Welsh Government make available to pay for the service, as this cannot be delivered within existing resources. As everyone will be aware, the Test Trace Project strategy is a key element of the Welsh Government route plan for relaxing the corona lockdown in Wales. The increased testing and contact tracing will allow us to find out quickly who has the virus and who is at risk of having caught it, so they can self-isolate and prevent spreading it to others. In Wales, councils have been tasked with the responsibility to establish local community contact tracing cells in each of their areas, in partnership with regional health boards, with the contact tracing being overseen at a national level by Public Health Wales. Welsh Government published their overarching Test Trace Project plan on the 13th of May, and councils and health boards had less than 2.5 weeks to get the service up and running from scratch, ready for commencement of contact tracing on the 1st of June. Therefore, I would like to pay tribute to the officers for the enormous amount of work that has gone on into setting up the local contact tracing team in Newport. This required a collective effort across all council services, supported by the SRS, to recruit and train the staff, set up the equipment, develop temporary databases, and put in place interim management arrangements. Because of their experience in dealing with contagious diseases, the work at both a local and regional level is being led by council environmental health officers. However, this would not have been possible without significant numbers of staff from other services volunteering to carry out this contact tracing work from home, as many of them are currently vulnerable and shielding. Because of the rapid pace of change, there has been a significant development since the report was drafted, so I can update Cabinet colleagues on what's been happening in the past few weeks. We started the contact tracing work on the 1st of June with 10 contact advisors from customer services and 5 contact tracers from public protection, all working from home and using an interim database set up by the SRS. The new CRN national database is now online and operational, but it has meant retraining the staff to use a different IT system. Since then, we've had a steady flow of positive cases. In the first 2 weeks in June, there were 11 positive cases referred, which generated 54 separate contacts. It is anticipated that the work will increase as restrictions are relaxed and testing is increased. The jobs are distributed to each of the local areas by Public Health Wales, with details of the positive results during the previous 24 hours. They're sent down to the relevant local areas. On the 9th of June, we received confirmation from Welsh Government that funding will be made available for the cost of delivering the service from July to the end of March 2021, but no specific amount has been allocated. Provisional estimates suggest that a workforce of over 400 staff would be required across Gwent at a cost of approximately 13 million. This included 6 local teams with 70 staff in each and a regional overview team led by Health Board clinical leads and environmental health officers. However, there is no clear agreement on the future delivery model and governance arrangements. It was envisaged that the Health Board would employ the staff and manage the service regionally, but discussions are now focusing on councils continuing to employ the local contact tracing teams. In relation to governance, the proposed model envisages a partnership board at the top of the structure, which could include elected members, but as I have indicated, the delivery model is entirely dependent on available funding. Public Health Wales expect the service to operate on a 12-hour basis from 8 till 8, 7 days a week, once it is fully developed. It should be noted that contact tracing may need to operate in Wales for the next 12 months. Data sharing and information protocols have been put in place at regional and national level for security of personal data being transferred as part of the test trace process to comply with data protection. Finally, as Cabinet member, I do need to highlight the impact that the contact tracing work will have on other regulatory services. We have 17 staff allocated to the interim service, and the environmental health officers will continue to have a role at regional level for the whole of the contact tracing period. Therefore, other statutory and regulatory services will have to be scaled back significantly to accommodate the contact tracing work. Leader, I would ask colleagues to note the report and endorse the approach taken to establish the service.
Thank you, Councillor Truman, and thank you for all the work that you've put into this personally, working alongside officers on this. I'm sure they're grateful for your support with this particular issue. As I said earlier, colleagues, this really does mark the recovery process, one of the key aspects of the recovery process. So we're starting to move forwards and how we continue to keep people safe while we're doing this. So I'll just invite comments. Councillor Truman, your hand is still raised. Do you wish to comment? No?
Yeah.
Yes.
Take it down, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Giles.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I totally support this. I mean, it's a critical development and vital, as you say, to managing COVID-19, including keeping the schools open, apart from everything else that will, needs to function. It's a really most effective way of keeping the R rate low. We've all heard a lot about that, of course, until we have a vaccine and treatment. And it's been what's been most effective in those countries that have managed the outbreak most effectively. They've kept that number down. I'd just like to say in regard to the staff have been exceptionally good in this as in everything else, but I would also say that public protection staff, environmental health staff are really good as well. They are very professional, as are all staff are, but to recognise the work that they do on a day-to-day basis as well as this. So we in Newport have been the epicentre, of course, of this outbreak in Wales. We've seen the fantastic work by Iron Bevan University Health Board and the documentaries. And we want to protect them and everybody else. So, so yes, I fully and totally support that. And I was pleased to note, I think, that Councillor Truman mentioned that Welsh Government have agreed additional funding, although we don't know how much, but that's good news. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Thank you. Deputy Leader.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Very much on the same thing as what Councillor Giles has just said. I mean, this could go on until July 21, and I'm glad to see in the report there that Welsh Government are taking the cost of this. But again, and I talked about costs earlier on in the last report, but because this does need to be well financed and well stocked regarding staff. But the 17 staff that we have redeployed, there's a cost to that to us as well with further training. And again, I know it's not just about us, but the costs are still there. And this needs to be funded very, very well, not just by us. And I'm glad that Welsh Government have taken that initiative on board to look at those costs. I'm glad to see that Nair and Bevan have started the process to undertake the recruitment to it. It will be vital in us going forward and keeping this R number lower than the magical 1. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rahman.
Thank you, Leader. The Deputy Leader said everything I wanted to say, to be honest with you. It's something that we're going to have to do. It's another vital service that this council is giving. I fully support it. We have to do it, but my only concern is around the cost and the loss of staff from the council. There's vital officers that we're going to be redeploying that we're not going to have the ability to use for our own services, but it's something that we have to do. So I'm fully supportive of it, but I think that we need to have further conversations with the Welsh Government, Public Health Wales and the Health Board with regards to ongoing funding, because it might not be something that we can sustain for the long term, especially for the 12 months that's already been discussed, and especially around the funding issue. And if we are going back to office-based working, or whether the contact tracers are going to need some space, then there's concerns around where we place them, whether it's going to be in a local authority building, which we have very limited space of, or whether it's going to be somewhere funded by Welsh Government and the Health Board. But fully support this. Again, it's another thing that we have to do as a council, and we're doing it.
Thank you, Councillor Rahman. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. It's just really to endorse what others have said. I fully support that we need it. If we're going to stop a second, third, fourth wave coming, this has to be utilised and has to be used properly. And I'd like to thank Ray for his work on working with the officers to get this up and running. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Before we take a decision on endorsing this approach, I'd just like to invite Gareth. Gareth, your teams have worked incredibly hard on this, and I think this is a time when actually the role of public protection becomes all the more important and rises to the forefront of our activities. So is there anything that you'd like to comment on the report?
Well, just to endorse what Ray has said and what's already in the report, this is just a stopgap. We've established the interim service by redeploying existing council staff. And as Councillor Rahman was saying, we can't sustain that in the longer term because those staff have got substantive jobs to go back to. So this is the point in the report about the future delivery model and governance arrangements being critical now, and that's underpinned by Welsh Government funding. Yes, we've had confirmation that funding will be available, but not how much. So there will be issues in terms of whether any governance arrangements and delivery model is affordable. As we say in the report, as Councillor Truman said, there are no additional resources the council could put into this. We've managed to make staff available in the short term, but longer term, there has to be a budget for this and it has to be delivered at a regional level. But yeah, tribute to the staff in terms of the amount of hard work that's gone in to get this up and running in 2.5 weeks. As the cabinet member was saying, we had 2.5 weeks notice of this. And it was a Herculean effort really on behalf of the managers across the council, not just in public protection. Certainly a lot of the staff, the contact advisors have come from the contact centre. So we're redeploying staff from customer services in the deputy leaders area. So it's across council really in terms of getting this up and running. So tribute to them and to the people who volunteered. I think Councillor Cochrane mentioned it earlier about council staff doing things that are not part of their normal day job and doing it on a voluntary basis, rather than there's been no compulsion whatsoever. Staff have put their hand up and have been prepared to help out. And I think that's a great testament to the work of the council staff and their ability to step up to the plate, really. So that's the only thing I wanted to add. Yeah, many tributes to the staff who've got this up and running, but we need to look at the delivery model going forward and the funding.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. So, colleagues, we've had an opportunity to discuss this, and we all agree that this is a very necessary part of our recovery going forwards, but have to highlight it very importantly the resource implications of establishing such a service. So, colleagues, are you content to note the report and endorse the approach that's been taken to establish the service? Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for your contributions today. We've had an opportunity to discuss our response and to discuss in full how we'll be starting to take forward some of our recovery as we move out of the emergency response situation. We've concluded our business for today, so it just leaves me really to thank you all for the contributions that you've made. I thank the officers again at every level of the organisation for the outstanding work they've done during this period. I personally thank you, Cabinet colleagues, for your support and encouragement during this period, particularly the Deputy Leader for his support. And I look forward to our next formal virtual Cabinet meeting. So thank you all very much. Thanks.